Today on Podcast Them Down, we're talking about a Star Trek episode that I haven't watched. Welcome to Podcast Them Down. I'm Tim Regan from U.S. power metal band Burning Shadows, Fade to Black Metallica tribute, Dual-Violin folk metal band ISENMOR, and recently vacated Graves True Zombie Metal. Be sure to subscribe, like, or follow. And now, on with the show. All right, I'm here with Dave from Burning Shadows and ISENMOR, and joined once again by Doug and Matt, who are not Dave's opponents on this episode. Well,
I would like to submit we're still Dave's opponents. Just we're not playing a game.
All right, so you all had the idea for this episode, and I decided not to watch it. Watch the episode we're going to talk about. You know, it's the Larry King method. And instead, I was just going to eat these peanut butter crackers directly into the microphone while you talk.
I think that's good. And I think, you know, if anything, we can make today an opportunity to inform you about what I would say is the first Star Trek episode to be released to the public. So just imagine that you yourself are a poor chap in the mid 1960s, discovering this for the first time, and we will be your guides for that.
Well, yeah, and this is how it used to be, right? They didn't just air this shit the next day again. Right. So it'd be like us cornering you.
Label. We got the explicit label. Thank you, Doug. All right, go ahead.
It was going to happen. So we're just telling you what we saw last night on NBC.
Mm-hmm.
The fall was 66. We're debuting the all-color lineup. By we, I mean them.
Original air date 8 September 1966. So
keep it up, Doug. This is setting a really nice scene because I have to confess I also have not seen this episode. I'm reading along.
God damn it.
Well, we like to try. We like to think we've tried on this show, you know?
We like to think this, yes.
All right, and while we've got a third of ISENMOR here. No.
It's like an eighth of ISENMOR.
Yeah.
Really.
2/3 of ISENMOR.
We're going to need a cover, certainly by episode 50 of that Star One song, Songs of the Ocean.
Well, I was not going to bring up metal and Star Trek, but...
Well, we got to tell the truth to the listeners. This is a metal podcast, yes. Matt and I are proud creative consultants of Burning Shadows and recently vacated Graves.
And don't forget, Fade to Black. I've been to several Fishhead Cantina shows, so that's that's a good credential.
We actually have one booked for 2021. I don't know if that's releasable information yet, so you didn't hear that.
Don't worry, it's June. It's June now.
Yeah, but we know a lot of folks in the metal nation love Star Trek, so that's why we're here. They're best bros from Burning Shadows and ISENMOR.
Best shield bros at the very least.
Yeah, and I think you'll actually find that there's a lot of similarities between the themes of this episode and the genre of heavy metal.
Good to keep it
both specifically and in general.
Well, just real quick throwaway Burning Shadows fact: we recorded
American power metal legends, Burning Shadows. Yes,
thank you.
Not U.S. power metal band Burning Shadows.
One might say the most internationally acclaimed power metal band ever to come out of Maryland.
That's probably Burning not Shadows. True. So, but I'll allow it. I will allow it. So we did record a cover of a song called "Somewhere Out in Space" by Gamma Ray. And if you look on the Wikipedia page, it says this song is about Star Trek. But if you read the lyrics, I don't know how anyone ever thought Somewhere Out in Space is about Star Trek. But I did find a review on metalrules.com from 1997 when the album came out, and someone specifically says it's inspired by the old Star Trek series.
So this raises a question for me, for Doug and Matt. At what point in the original series does anybody ever fly into a black hole? Wait a second.
Oh, they didn't have the money for that.
Beyond black hole, never mind.
I actually believe
maybe in the animated series.
I mean, they definitely. I guarantee they at least twice flew into a black hole in a Larry Niven authored Star Trek animated series episode. I believe they actually did fly into a black hole in one of the tedious time travel episodes. I believe it was Assignment Earth, possibly. So I think that actually did happen.
You could be right. I've blocked that one from my memory.
So
I mean,
also
luckily,
in the song, they talk about take me down to the underground. I want to meet the gods of fire, and they keep talking about the gods of fire. And then I heard my people cry a million tears or something like that.
Exactly like that.
The song doesn't sound Star Trek-y, but
it sounds kind of animated. See, there was that animated series episode.
The bigger issue is that it falls in the context of a larger kind of ancient aliens, like Egyptians and pyramids kind of thing, like that Gamma Ray has been cultivating throughout this album, on which this song is, you know.
All right, so we've successfully tied this to Metal and to Burning Shadows, so I'm going to give myself 2 dings. And there's oh no, that's the end of the first one. There's the other one. All right, yeah. Talk about Star Trek now.
All right, Plum, let's get to it.
All right, let's get this ball rolling. Once upon a time on planet M113, which, just to begin with, I think is the worst way to say the name of a planet whose name is M113. I think M113 sounds good. I think M113 sounds good, but 113, which is the name of the planet repeated several times, is where the action is taking place.
And Mr. Spock's in command. Yeah.
So we open the episode. The very first time we, the Star Trek viewing public, see the bridge of the Enterprise, we see those notable Star Trek characters, Spock, Uhura, and some other guy.
Yeah, and this starts one of those classic Star Trek tropes. This is the classic ship surgeon annual medical inspection mission. That is the driver for the mystery.
Was this episode was it shot as a pilot? And
no,
was picked up?
And that's a good point. And that's one of the fun things to talk about here, because we don't have to fucking pretend that anything we see, any first, matters. Because this was the 6th episode in the can. We're going to get to the second pilot in 3 episodes. That's a great episode. One of the best. But they just shot an episode and then they aired it. And what you see doesn't mean anything outside of the context of that episode.
So for example, I think modern TV audiences are used to maybe an introduction of the characters. I think something as complicated as the Star Trek universe, you would want some kind of exposition, at least some placement, maybe even a little slug of the year, like January 3rd, 2381. None of that. It just starts.
Well, you get a star date, and you can figure out what that means if you really put the time in. But yeah, it just starts. All right, so Kirk, McCoy, and crewman Darnell beam down to M113.
113, please, Doug. That's the name of the planet.
That's right. And like I alluded to, this is they have to do a yearly medical of everyone assigned to a remote alien world once a year. that's what McCoy is here doing. Mm-hmm. And there's just 2 inhabitants on this planet. It's really the Forbidden Planet premise, just with a salt vampire instead of.
Well, I mean, they are archaeologists, so they are performing an archaeological dig to investigate the ruins of whatever it was, the civilization on planet M113. Whatever that. It's not important who they were. We never learn anything about them, but there are these ruins.
They had a very eclectic sort of architectural and design style, like the lions and the pyramids.
Yeah, I mean it's very much like it's like somewhat Egyptian, somewhat Greek kind of columns and stuff. Like you would expect for
architecture.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Okay, so immediately we learned that Dr. McCoy used to fuck this archaeology professor's wife, and I think that's actually the primary premise of the whole show. Pretty much, right, Doug?
Yeah, no, this is like we learn 3 things about Dr. McCoy in 79 episodes, this being one of them.
Mm-hmm. So he used to fuck Nancy 10 years ago, specifically 10 years ago. Now, we also know that they've been on the planet for 5 years. So this means that within a 5-year time span, Nancy and Dr. McCoy broke up, and then she met Dr. Crater, and then he convinced her to live on this barren, sandy desert planet, home of the ruins.
Yes, denied. Go to
I was trying to surprise you with the soundboard, but this one sucks.
All right, so then, and there's that cute moment where Kirk gives McCoy the straw. It's like, you got to bring flowers.
Oh, right, yeah. So they're walking up to the cave entrance that they live in, and so immediately he's saying, you used to date this girl. You should bring her flowers when you're visiting your ex-girlfriend and her husband. As you do. And so there's lots of like really interesting talking about their relationship in front of her husband, in front of other people, just like, hey, remember we used to go out and you're beautiful, and you don't look a day over, I don't know how old she is, but you look exactly like you did 10 years ago. And Dr. McCoy very much wants to fuck this man's wife again.
Yeah, and to get to the science fiction here, so Darnell, Kirk, and McCoy all see a different woman in the pre-credit sequence. Yeah. And then Darnell makes a comment that I could have sworn I left you on Wrigley's Pleasure Planet. And they all like, get out here, Darnell. Like, I didn't mean any disrespect. And anyway, then Nancy excuses herself, and then there's Darnell outside, and she says something to him, and then she leaves, and then he kind of creepily follows her. It's like, I don't know how that was not going to be creepy. I mean, it is, but in the other way, it turns out. And
I watched this episode with my roommate Matey, and she definitely agreed with me that the whole episode has a pretty rapey vibe. So I think our first encounter with Star Trek is probably not the most. It's not very palatable given a lot of 21st century feelings and mores. It's not great. It's not a great feeling.
At least no future episodes were ever rapey ever again.
Well, yeah, that's a plus. I mean, it's a rare miss.
Yeah, they didn't get to the actual rape until Star Trek Nemesis, so
yeah,
got some time.
Well, I mean, Doug, there is violations though. We can't not talk about violations.
You're right. That's true. Yeah, poor Troy, and we'll both.
Yeah.
give us 100 episodes, we'll be there.
Yep.
Well,
I mean,
the whole
Yeah,
podcast
I'd almost argue Next Generation is worse on gender issues than the original series when you get down to it.
well, I think as we rewatch the original series, well, that's a great debate to have. But
Okay, so yeah, and I did have to look Wrigley's Pleasure Planet up, and it is Wrigley like the bubble gum.
I was
spearmint gum.
Yeah.
No.
The baseball.
And so it never is mentioned again in the series, but there is a Deep Space Nine novel set on it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's called Lust and Latinum, Lost and Found.
Damn it.
I mean, I can't wait. If our audience will bear with us in about 700 episodes as we get to the Deep Space Nine novels, I'm sure we'll cover Lust, Latinum, Lost, and Found. But so to keep a pin on that.
That's in quotes. Yeah, it's Lust, Latinum, in quotes, Lost, or whatever, you know what I mean.
Yeah. That is the most, really just, man, they really tried with that Shakespeare port right there for a title.
Yeah, and fun fact, this I can't watch every single episode, type every single character into memory beta, but it's going to come to that. So Darnell, again, because of the 6th episode, it's actually not even interesting that he's the first person to die on screen and the first person McCoy to say is dead. But he does reappear in the Jim Kirk, Gary Marshall trilogy set of novels called, I think it's My Brother's Keeper. So we'll see him again, along with Ensign Kelso. We'll meet Kelso in 2 episodes.
I mean, I'm really enjoying this. I'm sure no one else listening is, but this is great. But I think we should, of those pop culture things people know about Star Trek. So Darnell, who, mind you, is wearing a blue shirt because this is a medical checkup. So he's in the science and medical division, which makes sense. He's not just some security goon, although he doesn't appear. According
to the Star Trek Encyclopedia, and I didn't go back to the primary source here. I'm relying on Memory Alpha. But
okay, sure.
Encyclopedia says he's a security guard. So,
but
it's like
he's wearing a blue shirt, Doug. I mean, the man's wearing.
But it's just like Star Trek Generations. You can wear whatever you want, apparently, in the Federation.
Okay, so he's wearing his roommate's shirt to work.
Medical security guard. He is a medical security guard.
A medical security. So he's a medical security guard.
He got his. He got his MD. And then went into security.
And I gotta say, I'll just comment now. I love, and this is like a classic not contradiction. It's inner conflict in Star Trek, because Roddenberry was always pushing for things to not be familiar, and also pushing for things to be really, really familiar. So it's a Western, and it's a space Western, except nothing's meant to feel like that, except it all does. So in this one, they're wearing the rawhide gun belts, except the phasers connect to them with Velcro.
Yeah, and these rawhide gun belts will remain a feature of much of the first season until they
Velcro
mysteriously
was probably
disappear.
new at the time of filming.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But it's just
So
like
it's like a space age holster, but still they need to have rawhide, not even black rawhide, but just.
Yeah, they get the black in the 2nd season, I think.
Yeah.
And I'll withhold my further comments on Velcro until we get to the cage or whatever the 2-parter's called.
Oh yeah.
Where they wear the kick-ass field coats straight out of the Second World War.
Yes.
They only do 3 times.
Yeah,
2 of which are in the movies.
Cool. Those are pretty cool coats.
Podcats and Down turned into a Star Trek rewatch podcast so gradually I didn't even notice.
Well, this is like a dry run because we'll have to figure out to get the flow.
You know when
we do have a fantastic editor and engineer in this program. There's a little quip right now, but that's just packet loss. It's not his fault.
So, wow, you derailed my train of thought.
Well, hurry up, because we do have to get out of the teaser of the episode.
That's right. Oh,
Well, Star Trek, I don't know. It's gone.
so we go through the credits, and I apologize if you watch this on Paramount Plus and don't have a center speaker, because you won't hear the narration at all, which is really annoying.
Which is really annoying, because I did notice that as well.
Yeah, and I pulled up the Blu-ray. It's there as it should be, and 7.1 Atmos, but yeah.
I might, you know what? I was thinking, so another thing we should really talk about,
hang on. Before you can move on, you dropped 7.1 Atmos. Do you really have a 7.1 surround sound Atmos? Because
No.
Okay. Because I was about to leave and come over.
I have a 2.1 system. Fun fact.
Me too.
I have several 5.1s, but the highest it goes up to, I believe, is 22.2 for consumer sound systems, and Atmos, Dolby Atmos should be able to render correctly with that. So anyway, but this isn't the first time a streaming service has ruined their own content by not encoding it correctly. Like the Simpsons, wasn't that all like squished or cropped or something when it first showed up on Disney Plus?
It was.
Yeah, well, I feel like missing an entire audio track is much worse than cropping.
Well,
it only affects the credits. It's really weird.
Yeah, and
weird.
they're trying for something, but I don't know what they're trying for. So my favorite one of these was actually on HBO Go. HBO Max.
Right.
They have
difference.
They have re-released Babylon 5, and there's a great latency with the sound versus the video. And it was, I was watching an episode called Babylon Squared that involves time travel.
Well, Babylon 2 came before Babylon 5, you see.
Well, you see, actually, the episode Babylon Squared is set on Babylon 4. You see, the first 3 Babylon stations were destroyed before they could open.
Yeah.
But this is kind of beside the point.
Maybe you should save this for our other podcast, Babylon.
Well, I mean, that sounds like a great podcast that Doug and I will start. So look for it on the Podcast Them Down network coming soon.
There's no network. We're going to jam everything through the Podcast Them Down hole. So everything's going to be Podcast Them Down.
So if I want to say network, I should just say hole.
Right. The Podcast Them Down hole. So I'm watching this time travel episode. It's about a temporal distortion, and the picture and the sound are not in sync. The picture is about 3 seconds before the sound. And I'm watching this and I'm like, this is incredible conceptual work, that this episode about a temporal anomaly is totally out of sync. And I was really impressed and I thought this was amazing. And then they switched to a scene that didn't take place during the temporal anomaly and it was still out of sync. And I was like, wait. And then the visuals ended, and there were still about 3 minutes of sound left of things that I had seen.
It's like watching a movie from a couple miles away.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, these kind of audio issues, streaming services messing up happens. But there is something that Doug and I should mention, that if you're watching on Paramount Plus, I think actually if you're watching on any streaming service, you're going to get the remastered episode.
That's some bullshit is what that is.
It is. It is some bullshit.
This is a touchy subject. And I think Matt and I are on the same page here. It is bullshit. But one of the things that's really amazing about shooting on a film and retaining film is the level of quality you can pull back out of that that you can't from video.
Yeah.
So the show looks, parts of it, at least the first 2 seasons when they bothered to keep shots in focus and all that. So it doesn't really matter if you don't back then. I mean, it looks brand new at points. Like, you see all sorts of stuff you never were meant to see. But the blow up on the old special effects, some people think looks bad. So they redid all the special effects in 2006 with CGI, and it looks like shit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, you can't beat the 2006 explosions.
Yeah, the digital matte paintings generally look okay, and I don't mind some of it, but yeah, the other problem is they didn't do it all at once, so the quality is all over the place.
Yeah, I think it was originally released for a Blu-ray project, and the Blu-rays were cool. No, you know what? It was for an HD DVD project. And they were cool because you could watch the original visuals, and then you could flip over and watch the Michael Okuda and really souped up, like, this is what the little Corbinite maneuver starship should look like. It's described like this, but on screen it's just a little blinking light because that's all they could do. But they're actually really trying to make it visually interesting and match up the visuals with the script. Because when you say something's turning left and then you get a shot of the screen and just see a little blip staying in the same place, it is a bit confusing.
Yeah, and Matt and I are going to have a conversation that will save about a certain thing that may say James R. Kirk.
Yeah, we will definitely talk about that.
All right, so we get through the credits, and then I love the captain's log entry because it not only explains everything you missed in the teaser, but it also explains to the audience that the things that they're stupid and didn't notice, like that they all saw different women. Kirk's like, we didn't realize it, but we all saw different women.
Like, I imagine a bunch of suits in the 60s saying, no one's going to watch the teaser. They're all taking a smoke break after the end of Nightline or whatever they're watching, right?
I think the audience may have needed that. It's like, hold on. Those are 3 different women, I think. But I'm not sure.
You know what, Doug? I think that's true. I think, audiences are not as savvy 2021 as they would be in 1966. So maybe you just need, and I think, as we'll repeatedly see, constantly repeating the same piece of exposition is a major theme of this episode.
That's like what reality shows do now, because they know you're not really paying attention.
Well, and this episode doesn't do it as much as they will later on, but my favorite thing that I think you really only hear in season 1 is they'll talk about going ashore.
Yeah.
Which is because it's like the audience just sees people sitting up in this room and then they're down in California and it's like, wait, I thought, aren't they in that box? But then it's like, oh no, I get it. It's like a boat, but in space.
Yeah, sailing the cosmic ocean.
It's like, wait, how'd they get down there?
Another thing that's sort of, they're still trying to figure things out. So, for example, they call sick bay. They don't call it sick bay. They don't call it the infirmary. It's the dispensary, which I guess is like where they dispense medicine. I guess that makes sense.
Having been on a Navy ship, you go to Dispo to deal with money. So, like, if you need to pay your bill, you need to fill up your cash card with. But you go to Dispo. You don't go to sickbay. Like, they should have gone all in on the Navy stuff, or not at all. Because
as we know, Timothy, there's no money in the 23rd century.
Yeah.
So we've evolved. We've moved past.
So they changed the Dispo to.
So now money is health.
It's where McCoy distributes mollies, essentially, based on this episode.
Well, yeah, actually, so we'll have to hold for the red sleeping pills, but they're a major feature of this episode as well.
The reoccurring themes, yeah, plants, salt, and mollies.
Oh, I love plants and salt because that's how you get French fries.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, honestly, if someone had ordered French fries, this episode would be about 40 minutes shorter than it was.
So we go
peanut
back.
butter, by the way.
Yeah, so we explain to the audience what they just saw, and then it's Kirk and McCoy, and they're putting the squeeze on Dr. Crater, who's got a great Brooklyn accent.
Yeah.
And then
Well, so
McCoy's
okay. So they discover the body of Darnell. McCoy says the famous "He's dead, Jim" line, first time ever. An actual line that actually exists in Star Trek, unlike
And
all
then he
those
said,
other.
"Beam me up, Scotty."
No one ever. There's no Scotty in this episode whatsoever. P.S. But so he has like a goji berry in his.
Are you sure it
in
was
his-
Star Trek?
Okay, so Darnell has a goji berry in his mouth, and they're like, well, this dumbass ate a goji berry, and so he died of alkaline poisoning. And he has like all these like suction cuppy marks on his face, but they're like, yep, that's what happens when you eat a goji berry.
Yep, classic alkaline poisoning, all the suction cups. Yep.
well, and I just want to point out right before this happens, it's when McCoy and Kirk are putting the squeeze on Crater about the mandatory surgeon's inspection, because he's like, I don't want an inspection.
right.
And then what are you going to do, quote the book? And then Kirk does quote the book, and yeah, it says once a year a starship surgeon inspection. They're like, oh, I see, you're just coming around and showing off your gold braid, which Kirk does a lot.
So
She does
I feel
a lot.
I feel like a lot of sci-fi is like they failed at writing other genres. So I feel like, like every holodeck episode of The Next Generation, they're like, I want to write a Western. And then, so I'll cram a Western into this episode. That sounds like they really wanted to write a shitty cop drama.
Well, you raise an interesting point, because there's actually a lot of really terrible, like unusually odd, hard-boiled dialogue in this episode. And the thing with William Shatner, like, he is amazing. He'll just ram it like 100% commitment. You just put the shittiest stuff in front of him, he makes it work. Like, Mr. Spock, assemble a landing party. We're beaming down with some questions.
And then they do.
A mystery. Right. I don't like a mystery. They give me a bellyache, and I've got a beauty right now.
He does say that as well.
And Shatner, it's just like, boom, he makes it work, always.
Yeah, and you buy, and I think honestly that's one of the reasons that Shatner ultimately won the job. No offense to that other guy who played Captain Pike, but I think it's a well taken point. But I actually think this script works really well as a science fiction piece. I think there are some Star Trek episodes that are very clearly just like awkward rewrites of Twilight Zone episodes and Outer Limits episodes, but in this case, the actual science fiction element.
There's something on the nacelle.
But in this case, I think it actually is a pretty groundbreaking science fiction script. Probably not executed very great, but they get points for trying. It's not like a story about Nazis. That Kirk and Spock are in for some reason, which we'll get to. We'll get to.
Oh, no.
But yeah, I would concur with that. And this is a popular episode. And, one of the things really unique to the original series with two things. Number one, a lot of real science fiction and real horror writers wrote scripts for it. Yeah. I forget who wrote this script, but it had a more expansive format. By the time it got to Next Generation, it was just a bloodbath, and nobody could write Star Trek. Essentially, there was a box but there wasn't that box in the same way in this show. And this episode is a good introduction to the show because the dominant genre form of the original series is actually horror when you get down to it, and unique only to the original series. And it makes sense because so many of the creative staff had actually come over from The Outer Limits, which had just ended.
Interesting that you mentioned that, because it does seem that the Outer Limits and Twilight Zone and the original series all fall into this kind of early American notion of aliens as being dangerous, and the monster of the week sensation that was prevalent in some shows back then. It's true that I've always had that interpretation of the original series being more of a kind of like dangerous galaxy than any of the subsequent shows.
Well, as I think you're right on, Spence Hammer, but as we'll get to, it's dangerous but really misunderstood.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of I think I totally agree that the original series is ultimately a horror show, but I think it's an interesting, like, self-aware reversal of the horror. So I mean, later on we'll get to episodes where the monster is really us, but I think even early on, even in this first aired episode, you see this willingness to take the horror element and kind of ironically reverse it in a way that leaves you questioning, who truly is the monster, who truly is wrong,
as Dr. Crater says, the creature needs love as much as it needs salt.
Yeah, I mean, we're also, I don't want to get to it right now, but I mean, we need to talk about what the actual relationship between Crater and the creature is, because I was disturbed by some of the implications of that relationship, but we're jumping way ahead.
Yeah. All right. So
we're over a half hour in, and I think we're still in the first paragraph.
Nearly made it through the credits.
Yeah. Well, this is why we got a good editor. Okay, so all right,
we might have to increase the release schedule of these episodes. All right, go ahead.
So Matt, yeah, they find crewman Darnell. Then we cut to this odd scene on the bridge with Spock and Uhura.
Yep.
Where Uhura's. I mean, I forgot to write down the dialogue. It's pretty good, but she's essentially trying to flirt with Spock and talking about, I don't know, not liking navigational equipment and something about telling a girl she's lovely. But do you think is this as far as J.J. Abrams watched?
This little like 3-minute scene is everything that went into the entire 3-film arc of the J.J. Abrams verse. It's Uhura complaining about the word frequencies, and Spock saying, "Well, you're a communications officer. That's a word you need to use frequently."
Yeah,
and then she
it would
said,
be illogical, for you not to like that word. Yeah.
And then she says, "I'm a woman. Why don't you ask me like how I feel, if I've ever been in love?" And then, luckily, to break the awkward conversation, Kirk calls up and says, Darnell's dead. And Spock says, "Great. I'll get the burial detail ready." And Uhura looks at him. "A man just died. Can't you feel anything?" And he was like, "Nah." Next scene.
Yeah.
You accidentally called Spock Scott, and I just wonder how that would change the whole dynamic of the entire series.
Well, there is a Scotty Uhura thing that like actually exists.
Yeah.
No,
in the original series, it's Spock and Nurse Chapel. Like, I think this is the only time Uhura and Spock flirt.
There was another time with his harp, I do believe. And I should also say that Montgomery Scott is the rapiest character, as we'll see, see in several episodes later. So I think that would be an incredibly uncomfortable episode if it was this banter between Scott and Uhura.
And Kirk would be the rapiest character, except as is definitively established, Kirk's only love is the Enterprise.
That's very true.
but no, the J.J. Abrams says that they just did what people think they remember Kirk being, which is in fact nothing like Kirk. Anyway, yeah, so they beam. So okay, and this is the great segment. So Kirk's back on the bridge, and he's still wearing his phaser, which I enjoyed. And then Uhura lets him know about Space Commander Ramirez.
Yes.
Matt, do you want to relay Kirk's message?
All right, so as we all know, the Star Trek episode's getting off very well. We already have a bit of a minor mystery that we need to figure out. We are very well aware that Darnell did not eat this goji berry. So what do you need right now is some casual 1960s racism.
What?
So Uhura reports that Space Command Admiral Ramirez or Captain Ramirez.
I think it's literally just Space Commander Ramirez.
So he is calling the Enterprise urgently to the starbase, and he says you need to be here immediately. And Kirk tells her to tell Ramirez to hold his horses. And that they have his Mexican chiles.
Yeah, it's like you tell Jose we have our chile, but he can wait.
They're still fiery hot.
Yeah,
and they'll get there in time.
And Kirk picked it himself. The only interest in Chile Kirk shows. Yeah. Well, we'll see. We'll put that to the test. But
I'd say it's high time we cancel Star Trek, but that's already happened about 7 times.
All right.
Probably about to happen 8 or 9 times more.
So then there's that sick bay scene, and there's a great moment in it where Kirk just flips out of McCoy for no reason.
Yeah. Well, first of all, Doug, it's the dispensary scene.
Oh, but, yeah. It's not the sick.
Right,
yeah.
Right. What's a sick bay?
So they discover that Darnell is completely drained of salt, which is strange because back on the planet, what's his name is saying like all we need is salt, man. We just need some salt tablets and we're good to go. So already you're thinking this is strange. So somehow they discover his entire body is drained of salt. And so this is a mystery, and they're yelling at each other for some reason. So they go back to investigate.
But the plant's in his mouth.
Yeah,
I checked.
But also, there's no known way this plant could have caused that kind of death. They looked in the book apparently.
Yeah. So then and I have half-assed attempt to mislead the audience into thinking something to do with plants, but then they also keep talking about salt.
Yeah.
Is this starting to sound like...
Is this when we should talk about we're skipping ahead, but they go back down to the planet. Someone else dies, and then a Ensign Green is copied by the salt vampire and beams back up.
Right. So we see both of these. We see Nancy, the wife that Dr. McCoy fucked, hovering over the one crewman who's screaming. And then the next thing we see is his corpse and Nancy transform into Green, crewman Green. And so Kirk and McCoy show up and they ask Green what's going on. He says, I don't know. I think he ate some goji berries or something. And so they beam up to investigate. Beam back up.
Yeah, and they did an excellent job casting Green. He looks kind of like Doug Hutchinson, the guy from the Eugene Victor Toombs episode of the X-Files, who also married a 16-year-old. So he's pretty creepy too. But
And so Green is now on the Enterprise, and this is a shape-shifting episode, one of many shape-shifting episodes. But luckily, you can tell who the creature is because they're always really awkwardly putting their finger in their mouth, as if this creature has the ability to become whatever it wants, but can't control really elementary giving away mannerisms.
Yeah, and for some reason, Yeoman Rand, Janice Rand, is bringing food to Sulu. And this episode only, I mean, it's a good Sulu found his true passion, which was being an ensign, which he would do for the next 30 years. But in this episode, he's really into plants. And he's
really into plants.
He's working the plant lab, and Rand brings him his food, and then Green follows them in, and then there's this plant that.
So to paint the picture, it is a clearly human hand made up to be a flower puppet, and so it's kind of cooing. And they talk about what great work he's done with this creepy flower hand.
What year did Little Shop of Horrors come out? Let's throw that in here too. There's a plant.
Well, and I see why
by the way.
They pulled Sulu out of life sciences, because it's something Rand calls him on that she's totally right about. Sulu, she calls the plant a she, and then Sulu's like, why do they have to put genders on inanimate objects? When, first of all, it is an animate object, as we have already seen.
Yeah, very animate.
I mean, I see why they took him out of life sciences. It doesn't really seem to know much about plants or science.
Yeah, so that was a good call. But most importantly, there's a space age salt shaker on the tray of food, which Green, this creature that is the master of disguise, just can't not rapily follow. And so it's really. Yeah, it's really interested in following Rand and the salt shaker, and so the entire conversation is just fixated with the Green, the creature, just looking at the salt shaker.
You're bringing up salt an awful lot.
Well, don't worry. There's a lot more salt to talk about.
What?
Yeah, it's very interesting because, like, the salt. The vampire seems pretty effective in its own natural habitat. It does rake up a pretty high body count on the Enterprise, but it seems really bad at it at the same time.
Was that just another clumsy metal reference? You got to bring body count into it.
Yes, it was. So then after the plant tips us off that Green is not who he appears to be, even though we already know that because we saw Nancy transform into him. But we begin to know there's something wrong with Green. Then he transforms into. He leaves the room. He sees Uhura, changes into a Kenyan man for some reason.
Swahili, or is that Kenya?
Well, yeah. So he speaks Swahili. So here we learn Uhura speaks Swahili, and we have another great 60s trope where we get unsubtitled foreign language dialogue. So he just starts talking to Uhura in Swahili. I don't know what he said. No one knows what he says. And
to your point, then he gets really rapey when he starts putting his hands around her.
And then she's called away to the bridge. So again, this salt vampire has really bad luck because just about every time he's gonna suck all the salt out of people's bodies, they're getting paged on the intercom. So Uhura gets paged on the intercom. The salt vampire has some kind of mind reading ability, so I think he knows Swahili. Or she knows Swahili because Uhura knows Swahili. I think it's something. It mentions later on that McCoy has very strong memories of Nancy, which is why the salt creature is able to be more convincing to him.
Sympathetic memory harmonics.
Exactly.
Makes a lot of sense.
I actually think it's something like I don't know. After we're gone, the spirit lives on in some sort of way. See what I did there?
Carries on.
So we get the sense that there's some kind of mental telepathy going on. But Uhura goes back to the bridge, and now this mysterious crewman is wandering around again.
Well, then he kills the guy that looks like he stepped out of like the heavy metal comic.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I don't know what he does, but he's dressed kind of apocalyptic. And then Rand. Go ahead, Nick.
Well, in these early episodes, there are lots of characters wearing equipment, as you might imagine. People who work on a spaceship would wear. Yeah, so there's people wearing like work coveralls. There's people wearing like weird armor and weird kind of like body protection. And helmety things. So this is a guy wearing a body armor helmety thing. What his job is, we don't know. We never know. His helmet didn't protect him from getting his the salt sucked out of his face. So it can't be that great.
Which leads to one of my flippies. So then Sulu and Rand walk in and they see the body. And then the first thing Rand says and points is, "Look at his face." Just in case the audience missed that.
I mean, so to paint the picture, imagine just taking a lipstick and drawing circles all over this person's face. And that's what every victim of the salt vampire looks like. So it's incredibly hard not to see their face. It's in fact the only thing noticeable about any of these people other than the fact that they're dead.
And I guess this is when Spock and Kirk go back to the planet to do some war.
Yeah. Yes.
And then Dr. Crater, I guess he's hiding, but he's like in this pile of artifacts, which I guess the ancients had left it like that, but it just looks like a bunch of fiberglass stuff that he's made a little fort out of. And then he's dug in.
Yeah, because he knows that retribution's coming. So he hides out in the ruins of the civilization. And Kirk and Spock have a really dumb plan that basically involves Kirk walking behind the fort and Spock saying, "Hey!" And Crater turns around, which allows Kirk to shoot him. And he gets stunned. And then we get the big reveal of what's going on.
Yeah, and I think this cuts to one of my favorite sections where, at this point, I guess, I think because I remember the monster walks in on McCoy. The doctor went at McCoy door, and we learned that in the future you just sleep in your clothes. Just on your bed.
Just with no sheets.
Yeah.
It isn't. Doug, we've totally forgot about the red sleeping pills.
Yes. Yeah.
So
you gave me those last week.
Yeah. So
take one yourself.
So McCoy's upset because Nancy's missing, and he says, "I need to get some rest." And Kirk says, "Why don't you take the red pills? They're great." And so there's a big cartoonish bottle of red pills that are spilled all over the place because he's a doctor, and so he's taken some red sleeping pills, which will factor in.
Maybe that's why he's a jerk to women all the time.
He's a gentleman.
He's a Southern gentleman, in fact.
I stand by what I said.
I'll make an aside, but all of their like real actor regional accents come out so strong in this episode. Like Nimoy sounds like out of Brooklyn, and DeForest Kelly, D. Kelly talks about making eras.
He does make a lot of eras.
Yeah. But okay, so then
I think we need to beam down to the planet, hon.
Yeah. Every borough of New York is well represented in the show. Baltimore less so.
I was about to ask.
I don't think there's any. I don't know that there's been any character on Star Trek from Baltimore. Which is quite a shame.
Salt no more, hon.
I think the most prominent space character that I can think of from Baltimore is the guy whose name escapes me now from The Expanse.
Oh, that's right. That guy.
Lewis from Balmer.
And Penny Johnson in the Orville. And
Yes.
Tim's probably seen the episode.
I have.
But it's pretty amazing.
Yep.
If you guys haven't watched the Orville, watch the Orville. It's real Star Trek.
Yeah, we'll do a rewatch podcast via Podcast Them Down for that too.
That's going to be an angry conversation when we get to the Orville.
Season 2 sublime. The first season, I get why people don't like the first half of it. But yeah, we'll hold that.
Okay, great. So how are we doing on time? Because we're about to get silly.
Oh, we're like way over. Did you want to stop and start another episode?
That's up to you. I mean, we can keep going all night. This can be like a 4-hour.
You guys can keep going all night.
Well, they're doing the heavy lifting, so
yeah, it's true. You can.
Yeah, I think they should be one-offs. I don't think they really lend themselves to being broken. But if we,
Dave, if you give me some like canned responses, I know. You go to bed.
You got the B-roll. You can just patch me in.
That's right. Interesting.
Yeah, well, this is a good dry run. We'll come up with more of a format.
And I'll watch the episode next time.
This will be. I still won't. No.
I do think we need one person who did.
Yeah, I agree.
This will be a mega episode of Podcast Them Down. So let's just keep going.
Matt and Doug have such a breadth and depth of Star Trek knowledge that I can only begin to kind of rival when it comes to something like The Lord of the Rings.
No, you just got to tip in or relate it to something else, like a Balmer accent, hon.
No, this is fair. But I'm so the all of the deeper connections are so lost on me. I will be game. I'll watch the next episode that we talk about, but I'm not going to have this deep connection.
So you just need a couple monitors when you watch any episode, and you keep memory alpha and memory beta up. And you'll get everything at once.
Check for references and then take.
I actually think Charlie X is the first metalhead in history, so that will actually be a really good tie-in for the next episode.
I don't get that reference, Dave. You just need to be the adversarial viewpoint. You just need to disagree with everything.
What's great about the original show is you don't need to know anything to watch it. All these episodes are entirely self-contained.
And in fact, the people making it had no idea what Star Trek was or should be.
And I don't even think it's clear whether any of this actually happens sequentially. I mean, it kind of does, but they're also ambiguous about it, and that's where the star dates come in.
Yeah, but I also think this is like the great period if we think about all kinds of media. Like chronological time in television series doesn't exist yet. So we have a show like Gunsmoke that should literally go from the Civil War to World War I, if you think about its running time. But it's always 1894. So I think time doesn't really work quite the same way in 60s television.
Wasn't Hogan's Heroes longer than the actual war? And
6 years spent in the prison camp.
MASH being the big stuff ender, although the Korean War did go on forever. Yeah.
That's
hasn't
technically ongoing. Well,
yeah.
This is getting posted in a couple months. They can solve the Korean Peninsula conflict.
There's still time. This should inspire everybody to prove us wrong.
Yes.
I actually figured out the other day that the time lapse between MASH, the television show, and the actual Korean War was longer than the time lapse between MASH, the television show, and now. Which should be really interesting if we were going to make a show about MASH and the conflict of the characters on MASH. I think that would actually be really interesting.
All right, so we're going to do an Star Trek rewatch podcast, an Orville rewatch podcast, and
Bab 5,
Bab and Babylon, and
Babylon,
Mash and Mash.
I would also like to advocate for a sliders rewatch because I think there's actually lots of good tie-in with metal content. Like Jonathan Rhys-David is in it. Gimli from Lord of the Rings.
All right.
Jerry O'Connell's a pretty metal guy. I just watched Tomcats, and that's
I'm so
great
glad you mentioned
movie.
Tomcats because I think that's really like he is underappreciated for his role in Tomcats. He plays like late 90s douchebag. Oh god,
it's magnifique.
Like and he went from like the fat kid in Stand By Me to that. Like what a meteoric arc for an actor.
And in between those two things, he was the guy in Sliders. So I think that's, really telling.
All right, so the salt vampire assumes the form of McCoy and then goes to the bridge for some reason, and then it's like just sort of.
Oh, he goes to the bridge because again, the salt vampire is trying to suck all the salt out of McCoy, and he's just being constantly paged on the intercom. Like the moment the salt vampire extends its tentacles, it's
McCoy
just like
to the bridge.
Dr. McCoy, please report to the bridge. Dr. McCoy, report to the bridge.
And then there's that hilarious.
Are there not better sources of salt? I mean,
than humans?
Well, it doesn't know how to use the food dispenser, I guess.
We are to understand that it was consuming the salt tablets, which is why they kept asking for salt tablets on their resupply.
I remember they had the empty vase, and then McCoy's like, "Yep, salt."
I was going to save it for the end, but it sounds like you know all he wants is electrolytes, and Brondo's got electrolytes.
I mean, an isotonic sports drink would have been wonderful for this civilization.
Right. Well, this does predate Gatorade, I believe.
I think it's actually the inspiration for Gatorade.
Oh, interesting.
It predates Gatorade barely.
Well, so when he's on the bridge, he outs himself by referring to what they're looking for as a creature. And then Uhura is like, what, a creature?
Gatorade was on September 9th, 1965. All right, go ahead.
So
McCoy said something like, this creature could be anywhere. And people look at him like, who said anything about a fucking creature?
Yeah, okay. So then we cut. So they've captured, what's his name? There's that great scene where they're like, Spock's like, it's like he's trying to scare us with like the phaser blasts and all. And then Kirk's just like, well, it's working. Steely eyed. They're not scared. But anyway, so they capture him. And then he starts talking about, I forget if this is, this thing's the last of its kind. And think about ancient Earth history, the buffalo. And there's this allegory between the salt vampire and buffalo that will repeat throughout the rest of the episode.
Yeah.
Which I guess means everything Ted Turner's done with buffalo was for naught.
Yeah, so apparently we learned that, in the world of Star Trek, many threatened species have become extinct. Like whales will learn there's no whales of any kind anymore. But there are dolphins.
They shouldn't be so delicious.
Well, yeah, no, it's true. But in this case, buffalo are also gone. And so we talk a lot about buffalo for a long time. And how sad it is there are no more buffalo.
And I guess this is when another crew member dies. So Kirk, always being in command, has them raise from General Quarters Status 3 to General Quarters Status 4. And this is where I'm looking at 3 again. What's the difference?
I've only heard of GQ. I've not heard of anything like. I could be wrong, of course, but it's like you're in it or you're not.
I mean, if the space fleet is inherently more complicated than even a Blue Sea fleet, so you may need more granularity.
From the action in the show, it appears General Quarter is 3 is everyone go to where you're supposed to be, and General Quarters 4 is
go somewhere. Yeah.
General Quarters 4 is we're serious about it.
Yeah.
And they also have security guards lined up in the hallway, and one security detail is supposed to look at the other security detail, I guess, to make sure they're not up to something wrong. So they're in the corridor and they say, we can see the other team as they're reporting in.
All right, so then
You could just wear glasses then.
Then they beam up with Dr. Crater, and they're in the room. And then this is when Kirk expresses that he's willing to forgo any criminal charges at this point if they help capture this thing. It's only killed about 8 people at this point.
We'll forgive you for the 8 homicides.
And yeah, this is when Dr. Crater it really gets to the nature of the salt vampire and how it replaced his Nancy, but it kind of is his Nancy, and it's a living thing with feelings, and it needs love as much as it needs salt.
Yeah, and
just like me.
And so we learned that the real Nancy died very early on in the first year.
Ironically, from too much salt.
No, the salt creature ate it.
Salt vampire,
But he explicitly says that it needs love. Nancy. So this whole scene is going on, but it's also important to realize that Dr. McCoy, who is the creature, is also in the briefing room while all this exposition is going on. And through the whole kind of thing, he's just kind of given knowing eyes to Dr. Crater.
So wait, during this, where is the real McCoy? Or did I miss?
So he's
still in his took some red
room.
Pills, some Mollies.
To me, it's unclear if it was entirely the sleeping pills or if it seems like the salt vampire has some kind of like hypnotic telepathic power to lure its victims into a sense of sedation until it's sucking out the salt. In which point they scream.
So the real guy's rolling, and all right.
Yeah, he's asleep. He's sitting on his bed with his clothes on, with no covers.
As you do.
As you do.
Yeah, then Kirk, he's just going on and on about the love of the salt vampire, and Kirk's like, damn it, stop being such a bleeding heart.
And even though we have no indication that he's lying in any way, Kirk says, Kirk or Spock say,
let's Spock, yeah.
Okay.
Break out the truth serum.
Yeah, so he says, so they say, help us find him, and he says, all right, so they say, Dr. Crater, help us find the salt vampire. And Crater says no. And then logical Spock says, well, what if we tried some fucking truth serum? Because apparently truth serum will make him go against his will.
And then McCoy's like, I resist, but okay.
Yeah, he says, I don't usually advise truth serum, but in this case, I think it's warranted. Again, the creature is saying this.
Yeah, and then we cut to Spock in the dispensary, and then he's got he's been attacked by the salt vampire, but in his words, he's evolved out of a different ocean, so it wasn't amenable to his biology.
Because apparently Vulcans have a different kind, maybe they have some kind of a potassium salt or something. But anyway, he doesn't have the right kind of salt.
Actually, that's the question that I've been most curious about this whole time. Is it just standard table salt that this vampire is after? Which salt is it? It's for our salt creature.
Sodium chloride.
Yeah, it seems like straight up salt, like sodium salt. Yeah, so Spock has some green paint on his face and his shirt's ripped.
Yeah, what a stupid question, Dave.
Thanks. You're making me feel dumb.
They don't want road salt. They don't want
road salt. They don't want magnesium salt. They don't want assorted.
They don't want any old salt. They want people salt.
To cut back to that scene before here, now I'm remembering because I think it's McCoy who's talking because they're talking about just offering the creature salt without terms, and that's the phrase they use. And McCoy's like, hell yeah. And then Spock's like, no, we have to kill it. It's the logical thing to do.
How rare is salt in the galaxy at this point?
Why don't they just
In human
give it
history?
some
Like,
fucking salt?
isn't there an asteroid of salt that they could crash into this planet M113 to solve this whole problem?
You would think a spacefaring civilization would be able to easily deliver a near unlimited supply of salt. But, there are things about the 23rd century that I'm not familiar with, and that apparently is one of them.
City here. Like,
All right, so then we cut to so now they're going after it, and Matt. The only thing I have in my notes from this point is Spock violently attacking Nancy. But
So
some stuff
Spock violently attacks Nancy.
But Nancy's not Nancy.
No,
McCoy's woken up, right, and then she's in. Yeah, then she turns into Nancy, and then Spock's like, is this your Nancy? And he starts like.
So Spock, being the logical, compassionate person that we know, using the Vulcan nerve pinch, doing all the things that Spock does, in order to convince his crewmate and future, but not yet friend, Dr. McCoy, that this thing that he thinks is the girl he used to fuck is actually a horrible monster, just punches her in the face. And by striking her, I believe she reverts back to her regular form.
Well, I guess because she's going after Kirk, and did Kirk take some of the red pills? Because he
didn't, but he's like hypnotized. Kind of thing.
Yeah, and then she puts her hands around him, and then he unleashes a ghastly scream, which in fact should be sampled. Yeah,
it's a disturbingly high pitched scream. It doesn't seem in character with the Kirk that we've come to know. It's like but he screams like that, and then
we get the first person phaser shot.
Yeah,
which is just straight out of Doom.
So so in a way of either irony or double irony, McCoy kills the woman he loves and or the thing that killed the woman he loves.
How ironic.
And so the last salt creature is dead. Woo!
Hey!
And then we cut to the somber last scene where Kirk's just in the chair, and this is always fun to watch whenever you watch these shows. So the whole not to go to tangent, but where the whole Kirk Spock thing comes from in fan fiction is really how close the actors have to stand next to each other to fit in the frame. So if you watch it, it's very unnatural. So you do want to read the more intimacy that is there. It's always really amazing. They're 18 inches from each other.
They're really close.
And
it's called blocking.
Yeah. And when you do it for 480 lines of resolution, you got to get in pretty close. But anyway, so Spock detects something's wrong with his friend and maybe more, Captain Kirk. And he's like, "What's troubling you?" And then Kirk's like, "I was thinking about the buffalo."
Credits.
What?
Well, okay, so I think that this is kind of a germane point. Take a look at the writer of this show. It was George Clayton Johnson, and the Wikipedia's got a photo of him from 2006, and I don't mean to be unkind, but he looks rugged.
I know the photo you're talking about.
A man who would care deeply about the plight of the American bison.
He looks like the type of guy that lives on top of a mountain.
Self-sufficient type. Maybe perpetually mobile, you might say.
Uh-huh.
He is from Cheyenne, Wyoming.
Yeah.
Hey, that's practically a mountain.
Big mountain.
And Yeah, concern with the West and the American Indian is a reoccurring theme in the original series.
And on a certain Manowar album.
Yeah, it is. It's true. One thing we didn't mention, and kind of as we're closing up this episode, I would like to point out that I enjoyed the amount of time that this episode spent allowing the characters to eat. So, like, for example, Kirk is receiving a briefing, and it's a very important scene, but he's just eating, like, Technicolor blocks of foam.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
He also has a coffee cup, like his
Like
Enterprise
space
coffee
fruit.
cup.
Yeah.
So I wonder about some of these things where in the writer's room, they were like, how are we going to illustrate that the 24th century or in the 23rd?
23rd.
23rd century is different from right here in the good old 20th, 1960s century. I know they just won't give a shit about mealtime. They'll be receiving important briefings and having their snack at the same time. It's just like, whatever. We don't have the same rules about meals and eating and decorum when it comes to not snacking during important briefings.
Well,
Like,
I got that right.
That there was a list of those kind of like 1960s norms that we will intentionally subvert in some weird way for 5 seconds in one episode only.
I would, my guess would be that is not, they just, yeah, that's an interesting one. But yeah, there's certainly, Roddenberry was cross purposes with himself constantly. And he wanted to show that everything had evolved, but he also needed everything to tie back to where we live today to make the show relatable.
Right.
And as we'll get to in about 80 episodes, now 100, the
Jeez.
Star Trek the Motion Picture and the Wrath of Khan are truly the polar opposites here. Because he had like total control over the motion pictures. He was like, no, I don't want anything that resembles what we have today. If it's like anything you can buy today, it's not in the movie. Then in the Wrath of Khan, they're like, Nicholas Meyer, the person who made that, is like, I don't get Star Trek at all. Oh, wait, I do. They're just the Imperial Navy, and they're just doing gunboat diplomacy. So, yeah. Put them up in their Imperial Reds and put no smoking signs and fire extinguishers and those amazing field coats that are like,
Yep.
Right.
oh man, that's a fucking. We can buy those, Matt. The 3,000.
I would actually
3,000
love
what?
to buy them. My favorite thing about those field coats is that they have a map of the solar system on them.
Oh,
So they say
I have
say
that
on
patch. Yeah.
on the shoulder they say where Earth is in the solar system, but they're never in the solar system. This is like an utterly unhelpful map. I mean, if you find this, it's a 9-planet solar system on the patch at least. So if you happen to stumble across this solar system in the millions of star systems there are in this galaxy, it's that planet.
Dave, look up the lyrics to Star One. I think it's called Songs of the Ocean. And
Songs of the Ocean.
yeah, and if you need Matt or I to be the probe or the whales, because I think there's like 3 different layers of vocals.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I
Yeah.
actually have this album somewhere out in the other room.
The Blake 7 song, amazing. The Outland song, High Moon, amazing.
Well, so Hansi Kirsch from Blind Guardian sang on a couple of the Arion projects. Which the one that was like about the Knights of the Round Table. What the hell was that one called? And then the other one, but yeah, Star One, Arjen Lucassen, right?
Yeah.
I find his stuff hard to listen to because the characters always sing exactly what they're thinking.
It's
Well,
modern.
that's what
It's like, I
That's what
am
makes-
angry.
That's
And
what makes Songs of the Ocean a great song.
you know, it's just
Cannot communicate.
it's just like Star Trek when they have to over explain the plot to you.
The shuttle craft is landing. Prisoners are arriving, or whatever. Yeah. High moon. Dun, 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 dun.
Well,
Good
don't
song.
sing too much. We don't want to get a content match.
Yeah, we're gonna get dinged.
Well, I can't sing, so it won't happen.
All right. Well, any final thoughts on this wonderful episode, The Man
This is-
Trap?
This is a well-remembered episode. A lot of people like it, and for good reason. We sort of picked at it, but it holds up well.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you were to tell someone who's had no exposure to Star Trek and explain to them its cultural impact in both American and global culture, and if you show them this episode, they will be thoroughly confused.
But then you get to the Silicon Monster episode, which sort of refines a lot of these themes, and then it's like, oh shit! Then everything starts to click by then.
That is a great thing about the original series is every story is done at least twice, and usually the second go round is much better than the first. So in that sense, it's a vision of things to come.
Man, and isn't the Devil in the Dark first season too?
I that's a good question.
We'll find out.
I think it's second season, but we'll find out here.
Can't wait.
We'll get to it soon.
All right, Metal Nation. Thank you.
Why are you limiting it to a nation?
Metal Galaxy.
Yeah.
There we go.
The United
Keep your
Metal
head on the sky and your dreams in the stars.
Wait.
Yep, and keep on reaching for tomorrow.
So Spock says Vulcan has no moons. Is that accurate?
Oh yeah. Oh,
This can't be true.
It
How
is.
does Vulcan have no moons?
J.J. Abrams sort of added one, though, right?
well,
don't
yeah.
know.
Well, because no J.J. Abrams plot can exist without your ability to watch a planet explode from another planet.
God, I hate
And or
yeah.
But
That's
yeah,
right. It was
but-
a very far away planet. It was just, yeah.
But yeah, you're right, Doug, because J.J. Abrams did watch the first. He somehow watched the first 3 minutes of that scene. But when Uhura says, "What haven't you ever looked up at the moon and thought it was beautiful?" and he says, "Vulcan has no moon," so he turned off the episode.
Vulcan needs
sometime.
no moon.
Yeah, so he got all he needed. No moon, Uhura, and Spock are a thing.
Yep. And Dr. McCoy used to be quite the ladies' man.
Captain Dr. McCoy.
Captain Dr. McCoy. He's only a commander. Unlike Montgomery Scott, who later becomes captain of engineering, whatever that means.
This is true. Yeah, but I would love to see a Captain Dr. somebody referred to as such.
Would it
Well,
be Captain
actually, I
first or
believe-
Doctor first.
Captain Dr. Crusher, at least in the All Good Things timeline,
Right.
does become a Captain Doctor.
But is it Captain Doctor or is it Dr. Captain Crusher?
I think she's Dr. Captain. I think Doctor takes precedence.
If they're the captain, but they're a commander, so they're the captain of the vessel. However, their rank is commander, and they're a doctor. Does that make them a Captain Doctor Commander Crusher? For example,
I think they're the Doctor Captain. So that would be like Doctor Captain, Commander, whomever.
And this is where the Federation just got off course when it went away from the ship surgeon nomenclature. McCoy's the ship surgeon.
but what's his rank? Ship
Yeah, he's chief ship surgeon.
All right, so
But he's
chief ship surgeon, commander, doctor, Bones.
Leonard
I lost it.
Leonard H. Bones McCoy. Fun fact: he euthanized his dad a year before the discovery of the cure of his disease.
Mm-hmm. We'll talk about that. And yeah,
they found a goddamn cure, Doug.
and he does. And then he's all ready to betray the crew, except he doesn't because Spock won't. So he's like, "Fuck it, I guess I'm with you guys."
Dr. McCoy is very initially brainwashable, but it kind of wears off pretty quickly, and that's a theme of this episode, and I think throughout most of Star Trek.
Yeah, that's it. that humanist impulse. Damn
All right,
right,
well-
I'm a essentialist.
I feel like if I don't stop you, you're going to keep going. So I'm going to
Yeah.
stop you.
It's probably a good call.
All right. Thanks for listening to this 6-hour episode of Podcast Them Down. If you liked the Star Trek discussion, find Podcast Them Down on Facebook, write a message, and maybe we'll read it. Maybe.
We'll find you in this hole next week.
Thanks for listening to Podcast Them Down. You can find Burning Shadows, ISENMOR, and recently vacated Graves on Bandcamp, as well as Facebook, along with Fade to Black Metallica Tribute and Podcast Them Down itself. Until next time, keep it metal.